Hello students, and welcome back to the next lesson in our AS Psychology course. Today we'll be moving on in section 1, looking at research design. So, different types of research. In the last lesson we had a look at different methods and techniques for using research methods in order to get certain results from our experiments. And within each one of those research methods, we have to use research design. And what it basically is that it's a design that an experiment then has to carry out, which dictates how the participants will then perform the experiment. And of course, each one is going to have their advantages and disadvantages, which we're going to be comparing. So there's three forms of this design, and the first one is called the repeated measures design. And what it is, it's basically a design where the participants have to do the experiment twice, and each time they do it with different conditions. So let's just have an example scenario. Let's say we are conducting an experiment where our participants have to memorize a pack of cards. So they sit down on a table and they have to try and memorize as many as possible. Then they are also told that they have to memorize it with classical music playing in the background, and then they compare the results. In the repeated measures design, since the participants do the experiment twice, each time with the different conditions, they will sit and memorize the 52 cards first, and they will sit it again with the classical music and memorize the 52 cards again. However, this of course has its advantages and disadvantages. Its advantage is that the groups are of the same people, so there are, it's easy to control the variables since, you're not using two different groups in each one of these sittings. It's going to be a lot easier to say, oh, because they are the same people, they're going to have the same IQ and the same characteristics, that the way they're going to memorize both sets of cards, is going to be easily controlled. However, there is a big disadvantage, and this is something we call in psychology the transfer effect. And basically, a transfer effect is the impact played upon a person when they have already done a certain task and they are redoing that task. So, for example, when they are doing this task of trying to remember all the cards, the people are either going to, have practiced using their memory, so they're going to get a better score, or because they're going to be tired of trying to memorize all the ones prior to the second experiment, they're going to do worse. So this transfer effect can influence how they perform. Okay, the next research design is the independent groups design, and this is basically a design that has different people in each experimental condition. So it's exactly the same as the repeated measure design, but the same people do not sit the same thing twice. Instead, there's two different people who are going to do the before test, where they have to try and memorize all the cards with no music, and the after test, where they have to memorize all the cards with classical music playing. So, the advantage of this is that there are no transfer effects, since the same person isn't sitting it twice. However, the disadvantage is that the people are going to be different, so therefore there's a number of characteristics which are going to influence how you can compare both sets of results, since the people are going to have different characteristics. Okay, and finally we have the matched pairs design, and what this is, it's basically a form of research design where different people do different parts of the experiment, but they are matched beforehand and trying to put into similar groups. So for example, with our card memory game, before we conduct the experiment, we match people with, let's say, a similar IQ or of a similar demographic, saying you are the same age, so you should go together. Then they sit them down. One does the test beforehand, where they have to remember the cards with no music, and someone very similarly matched to them does the one after with the music playing. So this should mean that the advantages are there are no transfer effects, and there are going to be less confounding variables compared to the independent groups design, because it's going to be easier to control that variable of the people being different. However, the disadvantage is clearly that everyone will have slight differences that impact the results, so it is not perfect. That is to say that the people will, you can't compare them perfectly because they're not the same person. Also, another disadvantage is that matching people is hard and time consuming and can also be expensive. So if you are wanting to carry out, a quick piece of research, it may not be the right research design for you. Anyway, we have got to the question part of the presentation. I would advise you to pause the video here, try and not have a look at your notes, try and do this just from memory. answer these 3 questions, and once you have done so, hit play, check out the answers, and I'll see you then. Okay, so here are the answers. Each of the answers are going to be in the boxes prior to the slides. And yes, if you have got all 3 of those right, or you've got most of the advantages or disadvantages, give yourself a pat on the back and move on to the next video. If not, I would advise you to go over your notes once more, rewind to the bit of the video where you did not understand, and just check it out again. And once you have, reattempted the questions and got it right, I would advise you to move on and carry revising so you can go get those grades. So this has been the end of the lesson. Next lesson we will be looking at reliability and validity. So until then, I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.